Welcome, Mr. Mandel. Thanks for coming here to talk about your book with us. I have a few questions that occurred to me as I was reading it.
So the question that Chris asked me is, why did we turn out the way we turned out? And I think I know the answer. It's a simple answer. It's an answer that I'm going to guess a number of you will resonate to. It was my mother. We grew up in a home. We never thought of the word poor. We had a place to live, we had clothes to wear, we had food to eat. But we knew we didn't have any extra money. And while the word poor never was in our vocabulary, we knew that we didn't have any extra money. And yet, perhaps 5 or 6 times a year, over many, many years, 5 or 6 times a year, a neighbor would come over to our house and would say, "Mrs. Mandel, my daughter's getting married," and this was in the Depression, so these numbers are going to sound very small. "My daughter's getting married, I need to borrow $20, and I'll pay you back as soon as I can." And my mother said, every time, I wasn't aware of it each time it happened, but on reflection, my mother said the same thing every time. "Mrs. Smith, I want you to take it, not as a loan. You'll find a way to pay me back someday." Over and over and over, I grew up in that home until I got married to my wonderful wife, who's sitting there with my wonderful daughter. And then by the time we got money, of course, I wasn't so surprised at my mother's generosity. But then we didn't have any money. We barely had enough money, and yet there was my mother. And I figured out after I got a little bit older where that money came from. She didn't buy herself a pair of shoes. She didn't buy herself a dress or a scarf. It was in us like standing up when one of my mother's friends came in. We knew if we didn't stand up, she'd kill us. So we inhaled all that. And my brothers and I talked about it often. I think that's the answer to your question.
Well, that's amazing.
Excuse me, I'm drinking this hot coffee because my throat tightens up a little bit. There's going to be some afterwards, but I think you have to wait.
Don't worry, this is a long question. You got plenty of time to drink. Premier Industrial employed 6,000 people for quite a number of years, but only once did your employees strike. That fact alone is somewhat amazing. But during a 4-day strike, you made sure that the company took a pickup truck filled with sandwiches and thermos bottles full of hot coffee and tea to give to the employees striking against you on the picket line. I don't believe I've ever heard another corporation treating employees in that manner during a strike. It strikes me not only as humane, but a very intelligent approach. How did the strikers react?
This was a plant in Worcester, Ohio. We had 16 divisions. This was a plant in Worcester, Ohio. Our headquarters was in Cleveland, Ohio. And this was in the dead of winter. And we purchased that company, and this was probably almost 25 years after we had it in our group. And I visited all these facilities, not every one, but our central facilities of our different divisions, which this was. And I knew I would walk through the plant. And this particular plant employed, I'm going to say, 300 people. I knew 200 of them. I knew 100 by name. And there were sons who followed fathers working there. And when I would walk through, not at this particular time, but when I would walk through, they would be warm and friendly and hug us. And we tried to make, and this is going to sound self-serving, but we tried to make our units a good place to work. And it's called reverse engineering, you might say. And so we had a pretty warm climate, long negotiation ended up with a work stoppage. It wasn't exactly a strike, but it was a work stoppage, and there were pickets. So we did this, and in my book, I ended up that, I talk about this actually in the book, and I ended up with, why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we send sandwiches and hot coffee and hot tea around to these guys who were standing on the outside? Because we knew them all. So that's
still amazes me. In your chapter, The A, B's, and C's of People, you stressed the importance of hiring A players. And I love what you said about the B players. They bat .270 and don't make many errors in the field, but they can help you win the pennant. Have you developed some insights that helped you separate the A's from the B's during the interview process?
No, that's very challenging. There are times when in our arrogance we think we can recognize an A from a B. And an A is Chris Murray. Where's Jim? Jim Sugarman. There he is out there. Mayor Moyo is an A. I'm going to stop there before I get A's are just a little bit special, and you can define them any way you want, but they just give you more than you would expect. A B, in our jargon, is a first-class person who gives you what you expect. And we treasured B's. We treasured A's more. A's are a small universe. There aren't enough A's to go around. We're fighting for, business is fighting for them, government is fighting for them, the legal profession is fighting, medicine is fighting, everybody's fighting for this too small number of A's. And therefore, hiring B's is not, keeping B's is not slumming. B's enable you to really do well. The A's just raise you to a higher level. So on interviewing, no, we couldn't always tell. There are signs, there are clues, but we couldn't always tell. A's emerged. A's just, you after a while, you could spot the A's. And what we did religiously, and here I'm trying to teach, really. I want to share my experience. We sought A's, we identified A's, we kept A's, we made sure that all the things, all the goodies that A's want, not just money, that's one of them, but to be in an environment where they feel fulfilled, respected, and so on. And then we did something which I think we didn't invent, but which I never heard anybody else do. When we found a person, and through the interview process or just accidentally, for whom we did not have a job, but who we thought were A's, and we couldn't do this when we first started, we didn't have the money, but later on we did. We would park them, we would hire them, and we would say, look, we don't know exactly what your job is going to be. We recognize in you a high potential person, and to us it's a very small risk. It's a risk for both of us, but to us it's a very small risk. And we did this in my entire career, not that many times, maybe 10, 15 times, without a single failure. I just did it 6 months ago. And after my brothers merged our business, we started a private trust company. And just 6 months ago. So I think I'll quit.
You wrote, and I quote, being scrupulously honest is enlightened self-interest. Would you care to comment on how your policy of scrupulous honesty may have contributed to the success of Premier Industrial?
I would say everybody in this room probably understands what that means. I don't know that we didn't invent that, but I can tell you that we did not cut corners. We never cut corners. That's also my mother. I think the one big benefit, whether we made more money or less money, the one big benefit is not the point. The one big benefit, and I say this in the DVD, and I'll say it again, the one big benefit is how we feel about ourselves. You know, I will share this with you. You know, I'm at a position in life where I can look back on a lot of years. And so, you know, I'm grading myself, you might say. What kind of grade do I give myself? I can tell you whether I'm unique, the only person ever born who's going to say what I'm going to say now, or whether there are hundreds of people who would say the same thing. I can say that for sure, whereas I didn't know this when I was 25 years old, or 35 years old, maybe 45 years old, I know it today, that money has been a very important part of our life for two reasons. One is that it's enabled us to live very comfortably. And you know, this country, with all its problems, is such a wonderful country. You saw in that DVD this very impoverished family, immigrants. We are a country of immigrants. We are a nation of immigrants. Immigrants came over in steerage, thrilled to be coming to the land of milk and honey. This was a land of milk and honey, and it is a land of milk and honey. All of our problems, if you think macro, all of our problems are little problems. Well, you know, some of them not so little. I know for a fact that what I like the most about myself and my family, fortunately or unfortunately, we have 3 children, one of whom is here today. They're just like their mother and father. All poor kids. All involved in helping make the world a better place, all 3 of them. They care a lot. And I can tell you that in terms of saying, well, what's important, what's most important, what adds the most to my feeling of self-worth, is the fact that we've been so active, both as workers, but also as donors, in trying to find ways in which to invest our money. This is one of them. I don't know if Congressman Lois Frankel made it. I know she was thinking of coming. Are you here?
No, she couldn't make it.
Oh, she couldn't make it. But she told us about, she was at our house one day and told us, have we visited the library? I said no. And anyway, we came over here, fell in love with it, partly because of the $5 million dog. And so just walking into this building, never mind the fact that our name is all over it, just walking into this building is such a source of pleasure. So anyway, what I wanted to say is that it's very clear to me that the way we have lived our lives in terms of our involvement in trying to make the world a better place is where my feeling of self-worth comes from, not from the fact that I have a big bank account. And there's nothing wrong with a big bank account, but I thought when I was, as I said, when I was younger, that's what was a success. Now I realize success, real success, is in liking yourself with regard to your family, liking yourself with the way you've lived your life, not how much money you've made.
Thank you. The principles you develop for your investments, specifically the need for transparency and the requirement that a fund be audited by a first-rate auditing firm, resulted in your decision to decline Bertie Madoff's order to make an exception and allow you to invest in his firm despite the urging of your longtime friends and associates. As tempting as his annual rates of return were you surprised by the number of sophisticated investors who chose to invest without knowing how he achieved his results?
Yes.
Okay. Pretty straightforward. It's an amazing thing.
Look, so here's another principle which just reinforces my belief system, but I think also all of you in this room. If you have principles that you trust and believe in, if you have beacons to steer by, don't make exceptions. That's what happened. It's very simple. It's almost simplistic. We have certain rules that must be true when we invest. And one of them, there are maybe 10 or so, but one of them is that we understand what we're doing, that we understand the investments. By the way, there are a lot of fancy financial things that have happened in the last 20 years that we have a very talented department, but that still puzzle us. But in this case, we didn't understand how this gentleman and his firm were able to produce the results that they did. I'm sure there's some investment people in this room able to produce the results. And when I spent an hour and a half with him, I will tell you I was dazzled, very personable. Some of you may have met him or know him. Very personable, very intelligent, very sophisticated, very savvy. I was very impressed. But he wouldn't answer a certain question. How do you do it? Well, I forgot his answer, but it was, that's our secret, that's our trade, stock and trade, and so on. And the second thing we found out about him, another one of our rules, is that they have to be audited by an outside auditor of a certain quality. It's not just the big four, it's probably the big 100 or something. But if the auditor was not in that league, that broke a principle. So he had a very non-distinguished, nondescript maybe, auditing firm, and he wouldn't tell us this. And so now I'll tell a little story about myself. I knew in my gut we should give him money. That's not just a joke, that's true. I knew it. But I'm the CEO of our company. If I broke the rules, everybody would break the rules. So we turned him down. And we have an investment advisory committee of a lot of people, of a number of people who are very experienced. Some of whom invested with Bernie Madoff, who told me, look, every once in a while you have to do what's right. Never mind if it breaks the rules. Anyway, we didn't break the rule, and I became a hero.
I'll bet you. In your book, you reflect on Andrew Carnegie's essay, Wealth, which argued that wealthy entrepreneurs should distribute their fortunes in a way that increased the odds that the money would be put to good and effective use. Carnegie was responsible for the founding of 2,509 libraries in the English-speaking world, 1,697 of them in the United States. In 1997, the Gates Foundation began a series of grants that helped libraries afford to provide internet access to patrons. Your generous $5 million grant to the West Palm Beach Library Foundation will help us provide innovative library programs for the public now and for many years to come. Do you think that there's something about libraries, especially public libraries, that is particularly attractive to philanthropists who want their money to be put to good and effective use?
Yes, I do. Look, Andrew Carnegie was one of the great minds of our century or whatever. And he, I think, was one of the first, maybe the first, wealthy donor to make the case that when you make a grant, it's really an investment, and you have to satisfy yourself that the people who are going to manage that grant, that money, are responsible. Whether it's giving your gift, whatever it is, every year to the United Way, or whatever it is. Donors need to feel sure, as sure as they can be, and of course, with mega gifts like ours, we spend a lot of time on it. But donors have to be as clear as they can be that the money's going to be used responsibly. And sometimes it isn't. Often it isn't, okay? So I'm generalizing. But about Carnegie, Barbara and I happen to know the current president of the Carnegie Foundation, Vartan Gregorian, who, by the way, is one of the endorsers of my book. If you are fortunate enough to get a copy, you'll see he's said some nice things about me. But the answer to your question is yes, and what I've told Chris, and I may have told Jim Sugarman, is that I got my real education between the ages of, I'm going to say, 7 and 14, 15. I took out 2 books every week from the Glenville branch of the Cleveland Public Library. Every week. And I managed to read them and also do my homework and whatever. So I've been a reader all my life. And so being part of this library, in addition to wanting this community to be a healthier, better place for all its citizens, that was something that was a little personal for me.
Really glad to hear it, believe me. Can you imagine having a better naming opportunity in the library of a person who is so compatible with libraries? I'm going to have some questions for the audience, but first I'd like to give the microphone to Mr. Mandel's daughter, Stacy.
Uh-oh. This was not in the program. What's going on here?
This is impromptu. I don't have a question because I've heard this for almost 52 years. I will say my dad is only 49. But he wouldn't be here today doing this and having written this book without his brothers. And I wish you could meet them. Jack, God rest his soul, was the soul of Premier Industrial, and Joe was the ultimate salesman. The 3 of them together, I sat with them at lunches, were, I want to make you tear up, were just a trio of tremendous men. And what they were able to do with Premier and what they were able to do with their lives and with their families, I am so proud to be a part of. And I also don't want to neglect that behind every successful man, there's a very patient woman. And Mom, I love you, and Dad, I love you, and I'm proud of you, and I'm so proud to be your daughter. And I hope my kids, of which there are 4 between 2 and 21, turn out as well as the 3 of us have. Thank you, Dad. I love you.
That, my dear friends, is the name of the game. It doesn't get any better than that.
So you have quite a fan club. Can you speak about your support for the humanities?
Yeah, I can. That's been an interest that's developed probably over the last 20 years. I've been reasonably involved in the political world, mainly by supporting candidates. And I've been distressed by the way many of my friends, some of my friends, don't vote. What's one vote? I mean, you've all heard that, and you all know how wrong that is. And when I was, in 1939, in 1940, I was a freshman at Case Western Reserve University. You saw that, where we built that building. And I declared my major to be English, and a minor in education. I was going to be a teacher. And it was the summer after my first year that the opportunity came with my brothers to buy out my uncle's store, so I dropped out of college at that point. But I've sort of been interested in art, in history, in philosophy, in languages, and all the things, the geography that go into the humanities. And I saw an article about 5 or 6 years ago indicating that, and I think the data points were 1960, the number of people majoring in the humanities in 1960, and the number, I'm guessing it was 1995 or maybe 2000, however that long that period was. 17% in 1960 of college students majored in the humanities. In 1990X, whatever it was, 6. And I said to myself, wow, people who consider themselves college graduates, people who consider themselves educated, can graduate from college, in some cases with 0 credit hours in any of the humanities. You know, they get into the sciences or whatever. And I think when you live in this country, there's not just an opportunity to be a good citizen and to vote and to work for the people you want to be in public office. There's an obligation. I mean, how do you support a free society if you don't participate in it? So I don't want to make a long speech. But we then, talked to some of our contacts in higher education, semi-demoralized, presidents of universities, semi-demoralized about the lack of financial support for the humanities, and all of it going into the sciences, with which I agree that we need the sciences. We need people to help us, achieve a higher standard of living, better life, whatever. But we need people who have some familiarity with the great ideas that have just come down to us from all the great thinkers before us. So that's a long answer. But we decided to get into the humanities, and we've put a lot of thought and time into that at the higher education level. And by the way, the library really is a player in that. So it's because we want people like the people sitting in this room, people who are, you might say, exposed to higher education, hopefully, to study some courses in philosophy. And if you don't know history, if you don't know where you've been, it's going to be harder to figure out where you want to go. So that's a long answer.
Thank you, sir. I think we have time for one more question from the audience. You have your name on many different projects. Which is your favorite?
Okay? On this answer, do not trust me. This one.
Thank you, Mort, for sharing your thoughts with us, and thank you, members of the audience, for your questions and your attentiveness. If you haven't had a chance to read this book, I recommend it highly. It's one of the most straightforward, practical books on leadership I've ever read.